Hi, Sean. Welcome to the Power Talk show powered by Business Talks Weekly. It is a pleasure to have you on the channel today. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Before we start a conversation, can you tell us a bit about your entrepreneurial journey and the truffle, the current truffle that you're working on?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be here today and to spend a little bit of time with you and the audience. Absolutely. So let me start. I think probably the most relevant part, right, is I had worked in sort of the corporate world for a number of years with a really sort of keen focus on customer excellence and sort of customer experience. But I always had this burning feeling, right, that I had to do something of my own. And so I finally got to a point where I said, like many entrepreneurs, all right, it's time to go and do it. And so I'm on the east coast of Canada, actually, in a city called Moncton, New Brunswick. And, I think like many entrepreneurs, you sort of start at a pain point of your own, which was, we had a lot of snow in the winter here and we had a really hard time getting snowplow service. And so, we started an on-demand snowplow service, probably the most Canadian thing you could possibly imagine, sort of think Uber for snowplows, right? And this was an incredible experience. I did this for about 2 years. I think we were, ran into some challenges, right? But, learned more in that 2 years than probably any other period of my life. And we had customers and we were making some money. So that was wonderful. But ultimately, it was time to do something else. And so I got connected up with some wonderful founders for this company called Simple Texting based out of Miami. And it was a small team. It was 7 or 8 people at the time. And I was brought on board really for this sort of helping to scale as they were starting to see some traction around the customer excellence side of the business. Over the course of the year, I took on the role of general manager there and really worked very closely side by side with the founders in building that organization. So we scaled from a team of 7 to about 150 people over the course of 5 years. And it was an absolutely incredible experience, right? As I sort of worked my way through setting up the various teams for scale across that organization, from products to customer success, design, sales. Ultimately, we were acquired. We were actually acquired twice, first by a company called Message Media out of Australia, who was their largest sort of texting company and owned an umbrella of 9 or 10 other companies. And it was a big foray into the US. We were predominantly operating in the US. And then by a company called Cinch, which is one of the global CPaaS players. So Cinch had sort of acquired a number of different companies as they were sort of building their portfolio. And we were one of those companies. So it was, an incredible experience. I ended up heading product strategy and operation for that global team of about 4,000 people across a wide variety of really interesting products, from email to text message marketing to voice. But then, I sort of got this burning desire one more time that as much as it was fun leading a very large organization, I felt like I had to do something on my own. And so, getting together with some really great folks, sort of ideating, we said, what are some of the problems that we face, right, on a daily basis? you know, One of the things I think we had done exceptionally well through this phase of growth was hiring just, the best possible talent out there. We really saw talent as the differentiator between, companies who were really successful and those that weren't. One of the challenges that we experienced, right, was in this hiring process was, the hiring landscape had changed, right, especially for remote organizations who were now getting hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants, and the quality of those was questionable by times. It was hard to sort through that many applications, and we hadn't found sort of a good solution to say, how do you tell if someone is good? Which is where sort of Truffle was born. And Truffle is a one way audio and video interview platform that's really powered by AI. What it does is it helps to cut down on a lot of that time in the initial stages of interviewing, provide sort of structured one-way interviews for candidates, and then it uses AI to generate these really smart summaries, match percentages, and helps to sort of surface those culture fit signals that may give you better data insights, right? And sort of hiring intelligence to say, hey, we want to bring, sort of a human experience back here. And the way to do that is by giving hiring managers better signals on who they should be spending more time with in the process. Less time sort of quickly scanning a resume and more time really drilling in and figuring out what makes a candidate tick and whether they'd be a good fit for your organization.
So, what is the biggest challenge right now, like with AI and large LLM models coming into play? What is the biggest challenge from two sides? One is from the candidate side, and what is from the company side? What challenges do they face, and how does Truffle help them resolve these challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think on the candidate side, right, we've seen sort of hiring change, some macro shifts, right, where we do see sort of just an absolute barrage of candidates in some cases, right, who are using tools, whether good or bad, right, to help stand out. And so I think that's a challenge, right, when you're applying to jobs and you're competing against, many, many candidates. And I recently heard a statistic, right, was that something like they believe up to about 30% of candidates are leveraging some sort of AI in their application process. And those candidates, are standing out at the moment, right? And so that can be a challenge for a candidate if they aren't leveraging AI. It also may inadvertently help the wrong candidates stand out, right? And so from a company perspective, how do you tell who is really good amongst all of those candidates that are out there? And this is where we see, sort of the one-way interview as a really interesting sort of supplement to the resume, which is very static, right? There's only so much you can get out of a resume, and it's really hard to validate the information that's on there. And that's where AI can come in. It can layer over top of that one-way interview, right? To pull out key insights and help to really match more closely with sort of a customized intake that the company does. And so that's where I think there's sort of benefits and a challenge on both sides. For companies, it is sorting out as well and trying to identify who has used AI to a detriment here, right? And so that's one of the things that Truffle does as well is we help to surface, sort of candidate responses who have used AI as one of the signals. And then, the hiring manager can determine what they want to do with that, right? Is that something that they take into account as they're going through and hiring? In some cases, they may see it as a benefit, right? In other cases, they may see it as something that is not wanted.
So as we are on the AI topic, I would like to understand the proportion percentage, like what the companies are looking forward to. Are they looking for a more tech candidate, or they are looking for a more marketing sales kind of a candidate, because the tech part is now be handled more of an AI chat bot or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Um, our core customers, it's really variable. It could be anyone. We see folks using it for technical roles, although it's not our specialty, I would say, right? A lot of times on the technical side, there are a lot of really great platforms out there, right, that help to assess sort of technical skills. We really see Truffle as skills are one of those things that can largely be taught. It's the other things that we're really sort of assessing for here. It's that cultural fit, right? The style, those sort of things. So, our sort of sweet spot is really in this customer service, customer support, marketing roles, retail, which we see as very, very interesting, tends to have a high volume of candidates and, sort of difficult to assess through a resume who is really going to stand out.
So I just wanted to understand what is the challenge in growing a company like a recruitment company and scaling them.
So luckily we've been here before, right? So the playbooks don't always work, and we find they are changing, right, in a lot of ways. I think one of the biggest challenges is how do you get in front of your target market? Certainly, I think building a great product is one thing, and it takes a really keen eye and insights. And this is where we stay very, very close to our customers, right? We really believe strongly in a product-led growth motion here. We have built the product to be self-serve, right, first. And we think that that is a differentiator for us, right? Many of these products are built for enterprise. Ours is built for founders, right? For hiring managers, for small HR teams who may not have access, and it's priced accordingly, right? You can get up and running with Truffle in minutes versus days, weeks, hours on many, many other products. I think the challenge there is, you can build a great product, but how do you get it in front of people? And I think the marketing side is where we've spent a lot of time. really trying to dial in. And we went through many iterations in the beginning of trying to figure out, who is that target market and how do we speak to them and the specific challenges and problems that they're having on a daily basis. And so that's where we believe we've really dialed in this messaging. We are big fans of SEO and GEO, right? And how do we continue to build the brand such that we aren't paying for every eyeball that's landing on Truffle, right? But we are organically getting there because we're speaking to them, right, and are accordingly rewarded for it on the marketing side, right? So I think that there's, a couple things here, product, of course, right? Marketing, and then building something that really speaks to the customer and the constantly sort of changing evolution of the market. And even in the less than a year that we've been doing this, we've seen the market change, right? And the way that people are applying to jobs change as the market for employment changes out there. And so you've got to be really close to the ground, reactive, not too reactive. I think that you can tip that scale pretty easily, right? Where, everything is on fire, which is not the case. You've got to sort of stay true to the core values as well, which is something that I think we've done quite well.
Wonderful. So as we are on it, who is your ideal target audience? Are you targeting startups, scale-ups, or a large enterprise?
Yeah, so I think we sort of parked the large enterprise for now, right? Not to say that we wouldn't entertain large enterprise, but it's just not our core focus, right? I think for us, it's really important to have that core focus. It is more tech-focused companies at this point, I would say, that are really interested. They tend to be just on that front line of thinking about these things, right? That said, we span the gamut from gyms, right, and fitness centers who are constantly finding the struggle of recruiting new personal trainers and finding the right fit there. So we've certainly that's an interesting one, to retail, to this tech space. I would say if we're thinking about you've got to be hiring on a semi-frequently basis, right? So we're thinking about is a business hiring once a quarter, right? If so, they're probably sort of closer to our fit customer. If they're hiring a couple of times a quarter, definitely very interesting at that point, right? And the volume of candidates matters as well. So if we think about businesses who are receiving, 50 candidates to 100 candidates on an application, that's more interesting, right? Because they're having a harder time sorting through that. I always think of this sort of diamond in the rough, analogy, right? Where if you're getting 25 applications or 100 applications, but you only have the time to search through 25 of them, there could be a really great fit in that other 75, but you never get to them. Truffle gives you the opportunity to see all 100 candidates, right? And then you can choose to spend the time with the ones that you deem best fit.
Understood. Sean, you have an interesting resume. So if you look back at your journey, what has been your biggest challenge? And, is there any regrets you'd like?
Well, so let's go way back first, and I'll tell you sort of one, right, which is, when I ran my first startup, I think we were maybe a little ahead of the curve and probably not operating in exactly the right market. And I think if I had one regret, and I have very few regrets in life, I don't really believe in them, right? It's that, I should have recognized that earlier as a founder and, spent some more money moving into a different market and testing there versus I think being a little bit more sort of myopic and thinking about where we were operating at the moment. It would have been a big challenge for us to do, but I think if we had any chance of sort of surviving longer term, it was the thing that we should have done. So I think that's a really great lesson, is just sort of constantly reevaluating and being open, much more open to that change. And I think that's something this time around we've done more pivoting, right? So early we tested some things, they worked, they didn't work, but we were always very open to that while staying true to this sort of core of how do we know if somebody is good, and really helping businesses, especially small businesses we had worked in within the past, who told us that it was one of their top challenges, right? And we really wanted to help solve this. It was just a matter of what's the best way to help someone solve it. I think as far as challenges go otherwise, as we were acquired and I took on some different roles, right? Moving from COO of our SaaS division into head of product strategy and operation, it was a really interesting opportunity. Absolutely, enjoyed that experience. At the same time, it wasn't my sort of zone of best performance, let's say. And so, it took a lot out. I was operating across time zones, Europe, Australia. I had teams in, right? And that really took a lot out of me. And from a family perspective as well, right? I didn't have the time to spend. I have a young family, a 9-year-old daughter now, or almost 9 years old, right? And so for me, I had to make a tough decision at that point, which was, do I continue right in this sort of, I was learning, but it wasn't where I really wanted to spend my time. And so that's where I took the leap, right? Took a little time off and then into Truffle. So I think it's important to recognize that as well, right? Even though it may be
Yeah.
something that is interesting, is it ultimately the thing that you want to do? And I recognize that it wasn't, which was, I think there's no regrets there. I look back on that as, sort of a challenging decision, but one that was absolutely the right one.
Great, great. In that case, what advice would you give to an upcoming founder or a person who's working on a B2B or a tech product or a recruitment company?
Yeah, take the leap of faith. Just do it, right? The hardest part is starting. And then, sort of once you've gotten there, not to say that everything is easier, but you've taken the biggest step forward, right? And so if you've got that idea, validate, right? Spend a lot of time thinking about it, but ultimately you've got to do it. I would say the other piece is myself, my teams, right? The sort of core for us was always in our customer, right? And staying very, very close to our customer and taking our cues from our customer, right? There is this idea of sensibility about the market that you've got to stay close to that, right? And really listen to the market. But ultimately, you've got to look for a fit where the market is pulling you, right? You're not pushing against the market. And one of the best ways to do that is by really listening to your customers and creating these strong feedback loops, right? Which allow you to continually get that information and then push it through to, sort of all of the fabric of the organization, whether it be your customer support and success teams, your marketing messaging, and the product itself. I think that's a key differentiator.
So wonderful advice. One final question, Sean. What would be your advice to candidates with the current scenario in the market, like with AI, ML, and LLM models coming into place and tech having so new advancements? What advice would you give to candidates to stand out their resume or their profile in the current market?
Yeah, that's right. Is I would say use the tools that are available to you, but be smart about it. Thing I think about them as preparatory tools as much as anything. There are between the LLMs, right, and some of the other tools that are available out there, it can certainly help to hone your messaging, your skills, right? I had a friend who just recently was actually applying to jobs and they were using one of the LLMs to help them prepare by feeding them, potential questions and then helping to tweak their responses. What you don't want to do is you don't want to go then reading those responses right during an interview. But I think to help you prepare to really hone that messaging, there's not many better ways to do it today than to use those tools to your advantage.
So basically, be human, have some human touch.
At the core of it, right? I think, and we share this right during our, in the interview sort of format, right? Is ultimately you want to be yourself, right? That is the best way to stand out is to be human. In the end, humans are making these decisions, right? We are just providing more data to help them make decisions. And, humans want to see other humans, right, acting that way. So I think it's good advice.
Thank you so much, Sean, for your time today and joining our channel. It's been a really wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really wonderful chatting with you today.